Hi friends, welcome back to the channel, Adventures of Faith and Heart. My name is Mayra Barry, and today I'm reading a chapter from Her Own Way, a classic public domain story that I've modernized and rewritten for today's teens and young adults. This is a book I updated with fresh language and new life while keeping the heart of the original Christian message, God's love, hope, and redemption. So sit back, relax, and enjoy today's chapter. Chapter 1. A House Divided. The girls are running late today. You mean Hannah is late, Mother. There's no telling when Juliet will decide to show up. They never arrive together. It's unusual for Hannah to be behind schedule, though. Mrs. Catherine Tracy sighed, glancing anxiously past the plants that crowded the windowsill, slightly obstructing her view from her cozy armchair. The window faced a small grassy yard, hardly big enough to be called a garden, though the primroses and wallflowers bordering the path were in full bloom, and ferns thrived near the rockery by the windows. Across the narrow strip of grass, 3 tall poplar trees stood just inside the iron fence, shielding the house from the busy street beyond. The trees gave the house its name, the Poplars, and despite their imperfect placement, Catherine couldn't imagine living without them. They provided a buffer from the constant noise of the buses and traffic that passed by, even though some of her neighbors suggested she remove them for better air circulation. But at a rent she could afford, she had learned to live with such minor inconveniences. Though Catherine's age of 50 made her a delicate woman, she inherited worry lines that crept into her expression. Sitting comfortably in her chair, knitting in her lap, she radiated an air of quiet fragility. Her appearance was elegant but unpretentious. A simple lace collar, a small pink ribbon in her hair, and a few glittering rings on her hands. She hadn't lost her love for pretty things, even if they were small luxuries. She glanced up and noticed her other daughter, Salome Grant, adding the dishes to the table. "Do you need my help, Salome?" "No, Mother. The food will soon be ready, and once again, Juliet won't be here to eat with us." Salome turned to grab a dish of mashed potatoes along with the meat, placed them on the table, and put the vegetables next to the meat. Catherine watched Salome in between her knitting. Her 27-year-old daughter was tall, with a sturdy appearance, sandy hair, and pale blue eyes. Her neat style, right down to her smooth hair and plain serge dress, made her seem overly serious, almost stern. Salome wasn't the kind of person you would call exciting, though she certainly seemed competent and dependable. Catherine turned her attention back to her knitting as Salome walked to the window. "Here comes Hannah," she said as she peeked out the window. Catherine watched Salome walk to the kitchen. She sighed as she heard the gate creak open. She wished it were Juliet arriving. In a moment, Hannah Grant opened the door and stepped into the house. Catherine stopped knitting as she glanced at her oldest daughter, just a couple of years older than Salome. Hannah bore a striking resemblance to her sister, yet she had a darker complexion, stronger features, and an air of authority about her. She looked slightly harassed as she walked in, her presence filling the space with the energy of someone who was constantly in control. Catherine knew it wasn't easy for Hannah to work as a teacher at a local high school. Her daughter did her best to help provide the finances she herself couldn't afford. God was good to her giving her the daughters he did. She sighed. If only Juliet would view life more seriously. Her youngest daughter was the last child she had. She glanced at Hannah again as she placed her bag and book materials on the table in their living room. Her no-nonsense daughter held her posture firm with a set jaw. By the look on her face, Catherine knew she too became annoyed as Salome was. "Sorry I'm late, Mother," Hannah said, her voice sharp and precise. "But it's not my fault. I saw Juliet with that awful Chowcombe girl again, so I went to see if she was ready to come home. You know what she had the nerve to do? After I told her to follow me, she started to, but then when I turned to look at her, I saw her walking in the opposite direction with that girl." Catherine flushed slightly as Salome asked, "Mother, did you tell Juliet not to hang out with that girl?" Catherine swallowed. "Oh, yes, I spoke to her, but Juliet thinks it's unfair. They're in the same class, after all, and she says once she leaves school they won't see much of each other." She started to knit again, hoping her older daughters didn't see her perplexed expression. In the corner of her eye, she noticed Hannah crossing her arms. "Meanwhile, there's plenty of time for Juliet to pick up bad habits," Hannah replied sharply. "By all means. If you're okay with her spending time with the daughter of an actor, then I'll drop the subject." Catherine stopped her knitting and snapped her eyes up to Hannah. "Oh, I didn't realize her friend's father was an actor." "Well, technically, he's the owner of a small theater, and her brother sings at nightclubs," Hannah said, emphasizing the last part with a certain disdain. Catherine saw Salome's eyes grow. "Really?" Salome's tone dripped with disapproval. "Juliet is getting in over her head. What's next? She'll want to become an actress like them. Rich and fame will ruin her." Catherine felt all the odds were against her precious young daughter. Wanting to try and tone down the hostile atmosphere in the room, she defended her youngest daughter. "You know Juliet isn't that bad. She doesn't know the father or brother, and I'm sure the girl isn't as terrible as you say." "I wish you could see Juliet's friend," Hannah scoffed. "She dresses like she's going to a nightclub. Flashy clothes, cheap jewelry, and don't even get me started on her makeup. She's dragging down our school's reputation. It's not a good look for Juliet to be hanging around her." "Juliet needs to be told she can't be friends with this girl," Salome interjected, her voice firm. "It's easy to say that," Catherine replied softly, "but pushing too hard with Juliet will only backfire. If I know my Juliet, and she thinks we're against her, she'll dig in her heels against reasoning." "That sounds about right," Hannah muttered bitterly. "Well, I just don't regret going too easy on her. Are we waiting on her for dinner?" Catherine sadly shook her head, placed her knitting items down, and stood to walk toward the table. They all sat down to eat. She remained quiet as she served herself. Her appetite seemed to vanish, so she picked at her food. She had always felt slightly in awe of her older daughters. Their perfect behavior and strong opinions made her feel inadequate at times. She knew they had never truly forgiven her for marrying Captain John Tracy, a charming but reckless Irish officer. He had been a man of adventure and passion, far removed from their stoic and steady father, a man of Scottish discipline and prudence. Catherine's two older daughters were of age when their father passed away, and a while later she met John Tracy. She knows now that Hannah and Salome never liked what she did, even though she thought they'd be all right. They were brilliant women, able to hold their own. When Juliet's father's regiment had been sent to India, Hannah and Salome were taken in by their father's cousin. It was 7 whole years she had traveled with John after their marriage. When she returned to England as a widow, she barely recognized the serious, mature women her daughters had become. They were efficient and dependent, and their strict habits left little room for the impulsiveness Catherine cherished. Sometimes she regretted leaving them. But what was she to do when John expected her to go with him as his wife? They refused to go with her and John. Catherine continued to move her vegetables aside on her dish as she continued to think of her past. Juliet was her joy, a bright, mischievous girl who was far more like her than Hannah and Salome ever were. Captain Tracy's death had been a blow to her, but she had remained devoted to her youngest daughter, finding comfort in Juliet's vitality and charm. The tension between Juliet and her older sisters was palpable, but she couldn't bear to see her youngest child unhappy. even if it meant turning a blind eye to Juliet's rebellious streak. Salome and Hannah's conversation paused when the sound of their front door creaked open. They glanced at the door as Juliet breezed in, her arms full of books and her face glowing with excitement. Catherine watched her petite daughter walk in, her wavy golden hair covered by a tilted sailor hat, and her clothes as untidy as always. But her sparkling violet eyes and infectious smile made it hard to stay mad at her for long. "Finally, you're home," Catherine exclaimed with a forced smile, her tone affectionate despite the earlier tension. "I know, Mother." Juliet put down her books and walked toward the table. "I got caught up with Flossie Chowcombe. She had some drama to share, and I guess I lost track of time." Hannah stiffened at the mention of Flossie's name, but said nothing. Instead, she exchanged a glance with Salome, who simply sighed and continued eating. Hannah stabbed her fork into her food, chewing each bite with a clenched jaw and a little too much force, her eyes fixed angrily on her plate. Catherine glanced at Hannah, knowing her daughter was upset. She saw Juliet roll her eyes. "Well, let's not waste time," Juliet said, brushing off her sister's disapproval as she took a seat at the table. "I'm starving." Salome swallowed and stopped eating. "You're not seriously going to eat with your hat on at the table?" her voice disapproving and sharp. Juliet smiled and grabbed the mashed potato spoon and dumped some potatoes onto her plate. "Why not? It's fashionable to wear hats at lunch, isn't it?" Catherine could feel the tension in the air. "Oh, Juliet, why keep adding fuel to the already tense atmosphere?" "This is dinner," Hannah corrected with clenched teeth. Juliet smirked as she stabbed a bite of the meat she added to her meal. "Call it what you want. It's all the same to me." The tension lingered in the air as the meal continued in silence with only the sound of clinging utensils. Juliet chattered on, deliberately ignoring her sister's disapproving looks. Finally, when the meal ended, Hannah and Salome excused themselves to go out, leaving Juliet alone with her mother. Juliet glanced over her shoulder, and when her sisters were out of sight, she looked at her mother. "Thank goodness they're gone," Juliet rolled her eyes. "They're such killjoys." "My dear," Catherine chided gently, "you shouldn't talk about your sisters that way." "Well, it's true," Juliet insisted. "You and I get along so much better without them around. They're so serious all the time. Why can't they ease up a little? We're so different than one another. They're uptight and I'm not. You and me, we see things the same. It's almost like we're divided, you and me versus them." "Oh, don't say that," her mother protested. "You know what the Bible says about a house divided against itself." "That it can't stand," Juliet replied with a grin. "Sometimes I wonder how long our house will stand if we keep butting heads like this. Hannah and Salome are never going to understand me, Mother, and I'm not going to stop being who I am. They'll just have to deal with it. I'm not a little girl anymore, and they keep treating me like one." Her mother looked troubled. "I just wish you wouldn't push so hard against them. They mean well, Juliet. They're just trying to protect you." Juliet shook her head, unconvinced. "Maybe, but their version of protection feels more like control. Flossie is my friend, and I'm not giving her up just because they don't approve of her. She needs me, Mother, and I'm not going to turn my back on her." Catherine sighed. Juliet didn't mean to make her mother feel uneasy. Her mother should know she takes after her father, John. Her mother mentioned to her more than once how stubborn and determined he was when he wanted things his way. She supposed her mother thought of her the same way, but she never said so. Juliet glanced at her mother, who stood and washed her dish in the sink. Her back was facing Juliet. To not upset her mother, Juliet finished her last bite, rose, and was about to wash her dish and fork, but her mother took it from her and did it herself. A guilt came over Juliet. She loved her mother, but she was too soft with dealing with Hannah and Salome. They may walk all over their mother, but not her. She won't allow them to take away her freedom. She was old enough to know that she can take care of herself. Seeing her mother dry her hands on the kitchen towel, Juliet wrapped her arms around her mother in a hug. This put a smile on her mother's face. Good, that's better. Thank you, Mother, for washing those for me. Catherine smiled again and nodded. Knowing her mother was fine, Juliet turned and skipped out of the room. She presumed Hannah and Salome will keep the pressure on her about her friend Flossie. She won't just let them control her. She could only hope that their divided house wouldn't crumble under the weight of their differences. That is the end of Chapter 1. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this modernized version, feel free to leave an Amazon review. Your support helps it reach more readers. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more story readings. See you next time.